We've talked about relative frequency. Today we're going to talk about conditional relative frequency. It's really the same as relative frequency, except instead of comparing it to the total of all of the things that we're looking at a specific piece of them. For example, suppose we have our project scores. We want to know what percentage of males earned a score of A. Well, there were a total of 38 males. 9 out of the 38 earned an A. That's 0.2368, or 23.68%. If we want to know what percentage of those who scored an A were male, now we're looking specifically at people who scored A's, and we want to know how many of them were male. 9 out of the 21 people who got an A were male. That's 0.4286, or 42.86%. How about question C and question D? Please pause the video here and try those examples. What percentage of females earned a score of A? We look at the female column. There were 42 of them, and a total of 12 earned an A. 12 out of 42 is 0.2857. So 28.57% of females earned an A. What percentage of those who earned an A were female? Once again, we're looking at the A row, and we want to know how many of the A's were female. Well, 12 out of the 21. 12 out of 21 is 0.2714. About 27.14% of people who got an A were female. In our first exercise today, we have our data about whether or not people have pets and whether or not they're allergic to animals. We want to calculate the conditional relative frequencies in questions A, B, C, and D. Please pause the video here and complete the exercise. In part A, we want to know the percent of those who are allergic to animals have a pet. We're looking at the people who are allergic to animals. There are 32 who have pets out of the 224 who are allergic. That's 0.1429, or 14.29%. Part B says what percent of those who are not allergic to animals have a pet. We're looking at the people who are not allergic to animals. There's 276 of them, and 213 of those people have a pet. That's 0.7717, or 77.17%. Next, what percent of people who have pets are allergic to animals? We're looking at the people who have pets. There are 245 of them. 32 were allergic to animals. That's 0.1306, or 13.06%. Finally, what percent of those who have a pet are not allergic to animals? We had 245 people who had pets. 213 of them are not allergic to animals. That's 0.8694, or 86.94%. Next, let's talk about association. Association can be a pretty challenging topic, so listen carefully, and if you need to go back, feel free to pause and rewind. Association is a relationship between two types of quantities, or two different things. What does that mean? Well, here are a couple of examples to kind of give you the big idea. Suppose you know that someone is a female. Could you predict that she will spend more than 30 minutes to get ready for school? It's possible. Girls do tend to take longer getting ready. They have to do their hair and a lot of other things. And so it's possible that there may be an association between gender and whether or not a student spends more than 30 minutes getting ready for school. How about this? If you knew that a person was a male, could you predict that country music was his favorite type of music? Well, probably not. There's no association between gender and your favorite type of music. Here we have some data. We have a two-way frequency table, and we conducted a survey of 212 people. We asked them two questions. Do you have a sports car? And do you run regularly? We recorded the answers in the table. We want to know if there's an association between having a sports car and running regularly. Here's how mathematically we can determine if there's an association. We begin by calculating the conditional relative frequencies across the table. Once we have those, our examination can begin. We now look up and down the columns. The information that we're concerned with is here and here. Let's start with the first column. Notice what we have. If you run regularly, 25.8% of those people have sports cars. If you do not run regularly, 27.4% of those people had sports cars. It really didn't make a difference whether you run or do not run. The chances of having a sports car were pretty equal, and so there doesn't seem to be a big difference there at all. How about the second column? These are people who do not have sports cars. In our survey, 74.2% of people who run regularly do not have sports cars. And of the people who do not run regularly, well, 72.6% of them do not have sports cars. It seems pretty equal. There's not a big change. Because there's not a big change in either of those categories, we can say that these two things, running and having a sports car, are not associated. If the numbers were significantly different in those columns, then we'd have an association. In exercise 2, we have information about 179 students. We looked at each of these students and asked ourselves two questions. Does the student do his or her homework? And does he or she skip class once per week? We recorded the data in the two-way frequency table. We now want to determine if these two things, doing or not doing homework, and skipping class or not skipping class, are associated. We begin by calculating the conditional relative frequencies across the table. Please pause the video now and calculate the conditional relative frequencies. Here they are. Please take a moment to check your answers to see if you calculated them correctly. Now, let's take a look and determine if there's an association. We'll begin with the first column. We see that 2.7% of students who did their homework skipped class at least once per week. 53.1% of students who did not do their homework skipped class once per week. Notice there's a significant difference. That significant difference suggests that there might be an association. Now, let's look at the next column. 97.3% of people who do their homework don't skip class. However, 46.9% of people who do not do homework also do not skip class. Again, there's a significant difference in those numbers. That indicates that we have an association. And so we say that doing homework and skipping class are associated. We knew that because we looked at the differences in the table. The table, the conditional relative frequencies, will tell you whether there's a relationship, an association. However, be careful. An association does not mean that there's a cause and effect relationship. Take this for example. It's noticed that tickets for the World Series are more expensive than for other baseball games throughout the year. It's also observed that there are more people in attendance for the World Series than there are for other games throughout the year. You cannot conclude, however, that the more expensive the ticket is, the more people will come to the game. That just doesn't make sense. Higher priced tickets don't cause people to come to the baseball game. And so while these two things are associated, there is not a cause and effect relationship. This is everything you need to know to get started working with association. Again, this can be a tricky topic. You may want to go back and review the examples that we just did.